Chiefs preseason is about to kick off. What do you got to watch, and what do we have to have answers on by the time they get done? Welcome to Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
It is an actual Red Friday. I know it's preseason, but it still counts. Nice to see you guys. We are live for you here on this afternoon, getting you ready for the weekend. Thanks for joining us there. Make sure you like, sub, and hit that bell on YouTube because we are here 5 days a week on YouTube and on all the audio platforms. Thanks for making us your first listen. Check out another Locked On show for your next listen and get subbed over on Spotify and Audible and everywhere else that you can get a free podcast. You can find us. We're looking forward to it. We're brought to you today by LinkedIn Jobs. You can find qualified candidates faster over there. Post your job for free on linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to find the people that you're looking for right now. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Today, we get to finally talk about what's going to happen, not what has happened every day. We've been doing this live thing on every practice for most of training camp. Now we get to talk about the future and what we're looking for. And so we're going to start on the offensive side of the ball. Later, we're going to come back. We're going to talk about defense and what are the factors that we need to see in this first preseason game and who has the chance to stand out. That's all coming up later in the show. But please, if you want in on the text line, which is a new way that we can communicate a little bit more directly, a little bit more thoroughly, we're going to do this all season long. Hit us at 816-357-8781 and get on the line today. A lot to cover here. I'm excited about it, and I want to start on the offensive side, but I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting, NFL33.com, and RGR Football.
And I'm Chris Clark from Chiefs Corner, and I still chuckle when you say on the line, so there you go. There's a lot coming with the subtext line, going to be using that and seeing what we can do when it comes to the preseason game on Sunday. So really looking forward to that. Go get subscribed. Be ready for that. There was going to be some more coverage coming during the game, and you will not want to miss that. So we're back. It's been a while since we've been on at the same time.
It has. It's been it's a cavalcade of schedules, and that's what's going on. The Chiefs schedule does not always conform to ours, let alone our other daily schedules. So, Gary, nice to see you. Glad you guys are here with us live. We appreciate that. If we have time for a question or two at the end of the show, we'll gladly do that for you. So jump in there and let us know what you think. I really want to talk about this offense because the more and more that we see everything that is happening on the defensive side of the ball, which we're going to talk about in the next segment, it falls more and more towards what we've seen, honestly, in the last couple of years, that the offense has to put out. It has to be an offensive-led team, especially until this whole thing with Jones and Amenahue works out. We have to see a few things. And I don't think there's anything more difficult right now, I think, than predicting what's going to happen at tight end. So I'd like to start there. And what we should watch for in this first preseason game, I think, is it Bushman? Is it Gray? What do we see from Blake Bell? I don't think you're going to see a whole lot from him because he's a known quantity. But do you see anything at the tight end spot that really intrigues you?
It's going to be interesting. I think that you look at, Blake Bell, and he's been in Kansas City. They love him in Kansas City. And whether or not he's going to be on this roster is going to be a big question. And it's going to be, how does he show up in preseason games? Can he show that he can catch? If this roster and if Andy Reid wants to use a lot of 3 tight end sets, one of the things that makes that viable and makes it useful for Kansas City is having guys that can really threaten you in the passing game. It's great to have a guy that can block, and that's Bell's primary thing that he can do well, but it's not going to hurt you. It's not going to threaten people in the passing game like a guy like Jody Fortson or a Matt Bushman or a Noah Gray could. And I'm not saying Noah Gray's going anywhere. I know he's not, but point is, it's a different type of player than what you get in Blake Bell.
Yeah, that's for certain. I'm still leaning right now on it probably has to be a 4 tight end group. Do you see any reason that that's wrong?
I don't know. I think that it could be a 4 tight end group. I think that there's also a possibility they end up going 3. It could end up being 4. The big question is you get into situations, and I know we're talking tight end, but it kind of plays into it here too. I'm pretty sure at this point, Justin Watson has 4 years in the league. So a situation where Justin Watson, Blake Bell, those types of guys, you can get cut. They're not going to be subject to waivers, and it's going to be something that's a little bit different. You can bring them back the next day, and maybe that's a way that maybe if they think Fortson needs a couple extra weeks, that's the way he makes it to IR. And I'm just saying this. I'm not speculating anything. Maybe that's how Tony goes to IR as well. If they think he needs more time, even though the team says it sounds like they think he'll be back week 1, which I hope he is. Just saying that's another possibility.
It certainly is. And the balance that we see here, folks, I debuted this tool last week, and I'm going to have access for it for you over at rogueapc.com here coming up next week if I can get the whole thing to load correctly so that you can come in and play around with the numbers and see what it looks like. But that's really the back and forth. Being generous to have 26 on offense, I think is probably the limit. If you were to bump up, say, 10 offensive linemen, you go into the red here and you're over your roster limit. And this has a balance of 4 RBs, 4 tight ends, and the 6 wide receivers. Wide receivers, the other one that I think has to be in play with the tight ends. And maybe we should get to the point where we just call them pass catchers. What do you think?
Could be. I mean, that's basically, Travis Kelce's basically your wide receiver 1. The reality is that's what he really plays. So he's a tight end in name, but he basically is their wide receiver 1. And so I get where that's going. You start looking at the rest of how this is going to play out, and you start looking at the wide receiver room. We had a question, and I see you just started. Do they keep 7 wide receivers? Justin Ross, the way he's been playing at camp, it sounds like they're going to force it. He's going to force his way onto the roster. If he does, that's going to create issues at other positions that they've got to get figured out. And one of the guys, and I know you and I disagree with this, Shane Buechele. That's one of those guys. If he doesn't show up and doesn't show out in preseason, that is going to be something that maybe they think they can get him on the practice squad at that point.
Because that's the difference. If you go 7, 3 quarterbacks, that's the easy fix. Again, because I don't know that Buechele's going to stand out enough to go get plucked. So that's really the difference here that we're seeing is what happens when you try to keep 7. It's just a giant number, and I know that everybody's excited about it, and they should be. But, in the end, it makes things very, very difficult.
It does. And then you start looking at the O-line, which is one place where Kansas City has gone 8 or 9 in multiple different years. I mean, it's a question as to who they think is going to be there. And reports out of camp say that maybe Lucas Niang is on his last leg. That's kind of what we were thinking going into this camp. He may not be there. Prince Tega-Wanago could be the other offensive tackle they look at keeping. There's definitely question whether or not they'll keep 9. There's a lot of different positions in this roster. And I talked about this a little bit yesterday on yesterday's show. I do think that there's 47, 48 players that are probably safe on this roster. You get down to the last 5, maybe 6, and I really doubt 7, but you get to the point where you get 45, 46, 47 players that are safe on the roster. It's going to be very hard to make moves and keep the players you want to keep because you have other players at other positions. It's all a big ball.
And we're going to talk about like the back and forth. What do we need to see on the defensive side coming up next? But this all boils down to this is what we need to see on the offensive side. And then later in the show, those last 5 spots, those were largely special team roster spots. So let's see what comes of that. Before we get to the defense, though, got to tell you about our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire feels like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain when you're bringing somebody onto your payroll, and that's got to have the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to use LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. You can get in there, write up your description, add your job, and the purple hashtag will come up framing your particular profile, letting everybody know that you're looking for the help that you need. Simple tools like screening questions, as well as any kind of feedback, give you and make it easy for you to focus on the candidates that you want with just the right skills and are going to be the fit with the experience that you're looking to prioritize and who you'd like to interview and then hire. It's small businesses that are rating LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus all their leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster and for free. You can post that job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Now, preseason game #1 is a great way to stand out, to get on track for what you're looking to do. You locos know that. You guys watch the show every day. If you'd like to become one of them, make sure that you get subbed right here on YouTube or on Spotify or Apple or wherever you prefer to listen, watch, or do otherwise. We appreciate you guys, and I hope that you'll join us. Now, On the defensive side, there's a couple of things that I'm really intrigued by. I think there's really two things that you can go with. It's either the front end or the back end, because I feel like the linebacker level is fairly solid. But for me, it's where does the pressure come from? What can you get done in the first preseason game? We heard from Keandre Coburn yesterday, and I feel like as it's starting to tick up that the rookies, especially along the front, he and Felix Anudike-Uzomah are going to get a little bit more run, and we got to get a good look at them. This is a perfect time to do it early in the preseason.
So I have an interesting question for you. We always talk about the offensive line, and we talk about, the ability to play together, their chemistry, and how big of a deal that is. Knowing that Omenihu is going to be suspended the first 6 weeks, is it possible that they maybe make him play with the twos? And I don't think they'll make him play with the threes, but with the thought process of we need to see these other guys against better competition to get a better idea as to what we really have at defensive end.
I would certainly do that. I just don't know how Joe Cullen feels. There's a double-edged sword there. Yes, you want to let the guys who are going to be present week one get that camaraderie, get that kind of timing, especially if you're going to be running stunts or you feel like you're going to have some coordination. And let's be real about it. Whether it's on the outside or he shifts down into the inside, Omenihu's going to be playing with Chris Jones quite a bit. And while he's out and you're on suspension, there's not a whole lot that you're going to gain there. On the other side, you risk getting to the point where your veteran isn't getting enough action, isn't getting himself tooled up to be ready. I think this probably hinges on what the appeal is going to come down to. If he gets that reduced at all, I'm hearing more and more that it's unlikely that it gets reduced, which we can have a whole show on that discussion. But you're absolutely
There's lots of different roster things that we could have a whole discussion on when it comes to that type of stuff. And by the way, for those of you that didn't see, I did tweet this out and I did answer this in the notes yesterday. He goes on immediately. So he doesn't have to be held onto the roster until the second day. His suspension takes place as of roster cutdown day. And just a clarification on Chris Jones, since that question was asked as well, his fines still count against the salary cap, so that doesn't give them any relief. Sorry, just wanted to get that out because a couple of questions yesterday on it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's roster day. It's not just cuts.
Right. So the other question I would have to you then is, do you think you play him in the third preseason game then, knowing he's going to be out for 6 weeks?
I think there you actually do have to play him because that's going to be his last opportunity for some live fire reps. Right. I don't think it's a lot, but I do think you have to give him a pretty good look.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. And I think that's part of what we're talking about here when we're sitting here looking at the roster. It's a question of who plays where, when do they play. I'm really curious. You start talking about offensive line and offense in general. I'm really curious as to how they rotate the offensive linemen. Do they let Wanya Morris go in with the ones and play left tackle or right tackle at times, and take out Smith and Taylor just to see what Wanya can do? He has had a very good camp from what we've heard. So there's lots of questions as to how they're going to do it. I'm not thinking Wanya Morris is going to be the starting left tackle, but they want to see the reps of him with the first team to have an idea as to what they do have, because he is probably going to be their swing tackle.
Yeah, it does feel like that. And I agree with you. I think you do have to pepper him in. I think you probably want to see Prince as well, although you've seen him in the past. It is about the rookie class here, especially early in preseason. See what you got. See how they've made the adjustment, not just when they practice every day, but how they go against guys that are trying to beat them down. The opponents are what matters here. And so I like that concept of peppering him in with the first team. I don't think you're going to get much useful information from playing Donovan Smith more than 2 series. Yeah. If that's the case, then I think you make that switch pretty simply.
Yeah, and maybe that's what they do. Maybe they end up giving him a full series. It's going to be interesting to see how they go with the offensive line. And actually, it's going to be interesting to see how long the first team unit plays. That's a big question as to how long that's going to be. We don't really know. Usually in the second preseason game, Andy Reid's going into the second half. Maybe they'll go through the first half and come out the start of the second half. I would imagine they'll be out after the first quarter. If they go down and take care of business on the first drive and they do it handily, maybe they start making some substitutions they wouldn't normally do. But if they go down and handle business very well in 2 straight drives, I would expect that they're done, regardless of how much time's left.
Yeah. And on the defensive side, you need that a little bit more, I think, because there's so many young players, and particularly in the secondary where we haven't gotten a look at L'Jarius Sneed very much at all. And obviously the Najee Johnson injury, who just had a successful surgery, as we understand this morning. So kudos to him. Those are two key players that were going to be in that rotation in the top 5. So the question becomes, who's running right now? Is it Joshua Williams? Is it Jalen Watson that's out there with Trent McDuffie? Who's on the other side? Is Nick Jones in this? If you don't play Snead, does Nick Jones get a start on the inside?
Well, and the other side is it even going to be Jalen Watson or Joshua Williams? It could be, Boye Doe is shown out at times. Are they going to give him an opportunity to go with the first unit to see what he can do? Because they already know what they have in Joshua Williams and Jalen Watson. Don't get me wrong, they need to get those guys some more experience and get them ready for the season, but they know what they have there. Are they going to throw out the guy that was an undrafted rookie who's played well at times to see if he's the guy that maybe should be able to make the roster on the back end and be a special teams guy?
And that's really the key, is whatever looks you get, even if it is on defense, it leads towards, can we see you getting there from here? And how do you do that? You play on the teams. We're going to run down who to watch on special teams coming up next. So you stole my thunder there on Boyedo because I was going to claim him. So I'm going to go on to the offensive side, and I'll claim, and I think we have to give props to Nico Remigio. And I know, folks, I'm working on the name. I know it's pronounced as an H, not a G. It's just getting my actual face to say that has been a problem. But I think he's shown enough spark. And like you said, I think separation has come, and there are top 7 here that are demanding attention for the roster, including Justin Ross. I think Nico's the next guy right now. I thought it was going to be Amir Smith. It doesn't seem to be. So right now, I'm stuck. If somebody can shine out, whether it's Nico or someone else, I think that's the guy that's really pushing to, like, hey, I can do this too. I don't know if it's going to happen at the wide receiver spot, but he's really intriguing for me to see right now.
Mystery IR. Just call it right now. Mystery IR. Chiefs seem to have one mystery IR every year. And no, I'm not counting Justin Ross last year. I think that they had a pretty good idea he was going to end up on IR regardless. But they usually seem to have a guy that ends up on, hurts his ankle and then he goes on IR. And you're like, well, that's not going to take all year. Well, take advantage of the roster situation as you possibly can. Remigio is shown different things, and not just as a returner, but as a wide receiver. And that's really what has got him to the point where he may be number 8 on this roster right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's significant. It's him, it's Boyedo. I think 2 guys that we think can play. We heard Dave Tobe talk about, who's getting reps as gunners. It's Watson and Williams. It is Ross and Justin Watson playing a little bit of teams as well, but I'm really intrigued to see, what does Deneric Prince do in the return game as the returner rather than the coverage guys. Where is Deion Bush? What is Chamari Connor doing on the special teams groups? Because I don't think there's any way Chamari Connor doesn't make this roster, but I do wonder if he's going to get much playing time, because it does seem that Mike Edwards is taking that third safety role right now, and it's going to be a learning curve for Connor. So he can contribute early, and we know that he's kind of got a knack for special teams. So I'm going to be watching him pretty closely.
Yeah, and you look at a draft pick like that, and you say, is that a wasted draft pick? No, it's not a wasted draft pick. He needs time to adapt to the NFL game. That's fine. It doesn't have to be he has to be ready to go week 1. Maybe he's a guy that steps in and is able to ready to go, week 8 or 9, and he gives you something else on defense that you don't already have. But if all he is a core special teamer this year, that's still a valuable thing for Kansas City. And I know we've said this multiple times for all the new people out there. You really want to know who's going to make this roster? Go watch all of the special teams, all of the first run special teams, kickoff return, punt return, field goal block. Go watch those units. That's who you can see is going to probably be making the team, because Toba's putting his guys out there to see what they can do.
Yeah, I agree. And for the record, Chamari Connor's wearing Rashad Fenton's old number 27. You're going to be able to see him out there. Keep an eye on 31 Nick Jones.
So is Nico Remigio, which is just a little bit confusing.
That's why I put them together, right? It should be entertaining. But Nick Jones, by the way, 31, folks, in your playbooks here. Keep an eye out for him as well. Another guy that's got to make something. I really want to see when Felix Anudike-Uzomah gets into it, and if he's plays special teams, because I do think that's somewhere that they might try to take advantage of him right now, because he's got to be on the roster. He needs a little bit of time because of missing all of OTAs. I do think he's a couple weeks behind in his progression, but I think he's going to get there.
Well, and that's what you saw in training camp. I mean, he wasn't going with the first or second string. He was going with the third string. And I think that makes sense. Yes, he's a first-round pick. Yes, you want him to be a starter or, somebody that's going to highly contribute year one. But he missed all of OTAs and he missed, everything early on. That is going to set him back. He's not going to be where you would want him to be just because he missed those days with injury. So I think that it makes sense that he was running with the threes. Sounds like he's moving up to twos and ones at this point. The guy that's really surprising me that's been getting, first team snaps is Kendo. Kendo is a guy that we've written off, I don't know, for 3 years now, and he keeps sticking around. And now it seems like he's actually doing something. So I'm really curious to see what he's able to produce on the field on Sunday.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of mixed reports on him. Some feel that he's making the most of his reps, and some feel that they're taking a long last look at him. So let's see what he does in a game situation. I'm always a guy that I lean towards the gamers. If you can raise and elevate yourself and the intensity that you bring to a ball game rather than a practice, I do want to see that. And I do give that a little bit of credence. So maybe he will have that opportunity.
I was just going to say, and to expand on that, it's not just one game. You can't just do it one game. You have to do it in multiple games. So if he does something this week, he's got to do something again next week. You can't just show that you can elevate your game one time and just have a good game. You have to be able to show you can do it consistently. Some guys aren't practice guys. And I'm not comparing Kendo at all to the guy I'm about to say. Derek Thomas was not a practice guy. But you put Derek Thomas on the field, he was a gamer, and everybody knows he was a gamer, but he did not practice like he played.
Yeah, I can't even put those guys in the same sentence. But that's
I'm
okay.
not. I'm just simply saying you have to be able to show on a consistent basis in games. I'm not comparing him to Derek Thomas at all. But that's the thing. Derek Thomas never practiced well, but he blew it up in Kansas City. And I would love to see Kendo have even an eighth of the career that Derek Thomas had. I think that'd be a pretty good thing for Kansas City.
Yeah, at this point, salvage a fourth-round pick. Now, we covered a couple of topics, but I do want to just call you guys out since Gary had a question about Menahue. He can be placed on the NFI list. I don't think he can go to IR while on suspension, though. Am I wrong, Chris?
No, I don't think so. And it's not going to matter because he's off the roster anyway, so it doesn't count against the 53. So it shouldn't really matter. He's going to be off as of the final cut-down day, which is what I said a little bit earlier.
Fair enough. And then this one from Larry, and thank you, Larry. Thank you all for your questions. Check out another Lockdown show for your next one before we answer this, and make sure that you like, sub, and hit the bell here on YouTube. What are the odds for Remigio making the 53? I'm going to put it at about 3% right now. What do you have? No?
I would say about 3%. And quite frankly, as far as I'm concerned, he could play great in games, but he's going to have to overcome a lot to overtake the guys that are ahead of him. So his best, I hate saying this, his only way on the roster in my mind is an injury to one of the other wide receivers.
Agreed. But I will say this, Larry, I have him as 99% to the practice squad. I think he will be here through the season. And you never know if an injury in 8 weeks could elevate him as well.
I'm not sure. We'll see. If he balls out in the games and he's able to do what he's been showing as a returner, that's the one that really gets you in trouble, is if somebody shows the ability to be a returner, that can get them taken pretty quick.
They are hard to find. We'll let you know, and we'll give you any last-minute advice before game time if anything pops. There is a significant factor about what happens if you miss a game check in the preseason, even for Chris Jones. So keep an eye out here for the next 48 hours. We appreciate your time.
I know we talked about this,
but
I wanted to bring it up anyway. Is there any way you don't keep 7 at this point?
I mean, I would. I've been saying that since camp opened, but it's Andy. I don't think he's done that but ever once. And even last year,
he has in Kansas City.
Yeah. So I think 7 is a long shot still. There's going to be a brawl between Steve Spagnuolo and Joe Cullen against Andy Reid in the meeting room. So I still feel it's under 50% probability.
Well, it's going to be interesting. The only guy that they could really possibly get rid of and potentially think that they could maybe bring back after a roster move the day after cuts is maybe Justin Watson in the wide receiver room. The rest of them you can't really cut. Maybe Rice, or not Rice, Richie James. Maybe he's been in the league long enough to where he wouldn't go through waivers. But, Justin Watson is a guy that could go through waivers or wouldn't go through waivers. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. If they keep 2 QBs, that opens up a spot. Are they going to keep 4 running backs? I still think so, but that could open up a spot. 4 tight ends. If you only keep 3, that opens up O-line. There's so many different places in here that are just lots of questions right now. Yeah. And I do want to say this really quick, and I know this hasn't been asked, but it was something I saw on Twitter earlier today. Nate Taylor had a story out saying the Chiefs are not willing to make Chris Jones the number 1 defensive tackle in the league when it comes to average pay per year. I get it. They don't have another person on the team that actually is the highest paid player at their position. You go look at Mahomes, he's 7 or 8. I don't know what Kelsey is. Chris Jones is great, but the $31 million that the almost $32 million Donald has as his APY is not real. You go look at it. He's got a $35 million cap hit in 2024. He will not be there in 2024. That's how his number got there. It's going to be tough if Jones is really wanting anything near that. I think Kansas City would do the deal in a heartbeat at 28.
Yeah. And for those of you, Joe Thuney was number 1 at his position for a time. He's now number 4 as I just checked that. So we'll see if anything develops here shortly, and we'll drop something quick for you if it does. Thank you for your time. Make sure you like, sub, and get all that stuff taken care of. We appreciate you. Thanks for being here with us. Make sure you're subbed to this channel and get ready for some real football. Have a good one, and we'll talk to you then.